Before we start, I should clarify, because last week we gave you some, I guess you call it fake news or false information. Do you remember this, where we were talking about a book and I was like, I don't remember the title by Ruth Haley Barton, but it has the word community in it and it's purple.
It's not purple.
It is under the book jacket, which is the only way that you should read a book. But anyways, it's called Life Together in Christ. It doesn't even have the word community in it. So for all the people who are like, I cannot find this book, it must be sold out. No, it just doesn't exist. And so I'll take responsibility for that. So Life Together in Christ, Ruth Haley Barton, great book on community. So anyways, now the news is true. We are continuing on with part 2 of our series called Open. And it's all about, as Robin said, community and opening ourselves up to community, discovering how to open ourselves up to community. And what we talked about last week was just laying a foundation to say community is mission critical to everything we do as Jesus followers. In fact, to have a solo faith is really to have no faith at all, because our faith is meant to be lived out in community and can only be lived out in community, so much so that I kind of made this really strong, maybe jarring statement, but I really want you to get that it's simply this: a life of spiritual transformation is impossible without real, authentic community. A life without spiritual transformation, that's what we're all about here at Lakeside, seeing our lives transformed, is impossible without real and authentic community. So then you're like, okay, so do I just sign up for a group? Is there an app? Do you have a loneliness app so I can find community and all that? And we kind of said it's more complicated than that, because you can show up in all the right places and you can have all the right people, but you actually need to be willing to open yourself up to community. Let me explain. Is that, we kind of said this: community is not something we stumble upon. It's not just an app, click a box, and all of a sudden you have friends, but something we open ourselves to, because often you can be in the right environments, but you're not open. And so this series is all about giving you questions to reflect on, tools and different realities, ways in which Jesus lived out his faith and his early followers lived out their faith in relationship, that we can kind of take into the 21st century that will be helpful for us as well. And every week we're going to kind of give you a next step for that. And today, as promised, we're dealing with, okay, I want to be in community, but today's like the big buts of community, you could say, right? It's like, but Marc, you don't know, or Marc, when I was 7, or Marc, when I joined a small group, or Marc, I used to be part of this church, but. And so today we're gonna kind of try and figure out, what is it from your past that is stopping you from engaging in community today? In a sense, we're gonna clear the community and relational baggage decks to make it clear and open for community. So here's what you're gonna need today. As usual, a pen and paper. Always need to be taking notes, writing what God's speaking to you. I'm gonna want you to have your Bible, have a verse that I want you to highlight, underline, circle, really important. And then this is new, I want you not just to bring up your questions at lunchtime today with your friends on a phone call or with the family as you sit down for lunch. I want you to send in your questions, okay? So the number on the screen, you can text your questions. That way we won't even know who it's from. It'll be anonymous. Or if you feel comfortable, just throw your questions into the regular chat, whether you're watching on our website and there's the chat window on the side, or Facebook chat. There's 3 different ways that you can get your questions to us. They're all coming to Robin, and Robin and I are gonna do Q&A, or maybe better said, Q&R, question and response. We're kind of like politicians. We might dodge your question, but we'll still talk and make it sound good. But no, we will do our best to answer your questions, but we also realize it's a conversation that we don't think just as often as black and white as you may think. So we're gonna do question and response near the end of the message. So if anything that I say, you're like, or what about, or okay, but then what about this situation? Or what about when Jesus said this? So any question that you have, nothing's off limits. You just shoot it out and it'll end up with Robin, and then we're gonna walk through the Q&R time afterwards. So text it, put it in the different online chats that you're in, and we'll get to it. So often when we talk about community and are struggling with community, we point out to the fact that, well, community is really hard for me because I'm an introvert, or I had a bad experience, or I was betrayed years ago, or I just really struggle to trust people. And those things are all legitimate and valid. But today what I want to talk about is something we do in response to those things. So yes, a bad experience may have happened, or there may be certain character traits that you believe that you have, but then there's something that we do that we need to undo. And today we're going to start that process. And often we don't even realize that we've done it. Okay? Today what I want to talk to you about is something called an inner promise. Okay, maybe sounds weird, but we'll unpack it, okay? But inner promise, you've maybe heard it explained as an inner vow or an inner agreement or an agreement that you made, okay? But today we're just gonna call it inner promise, but all those different words work with this same idea. We're gonna talk about inner promises and how they get in the way of community. Now let me just give you a long definition of inner promises and then a really short, succinct one. That's the one you should put in your notes. Don't waste your time writing this longer one. I just wanna try and catch everything in it, okay? So here's what an inner promise is. a strong, usually internal statement that often starts with, I will always, or I will never. So a strong, usually internal statement that often starts with, I will always, or I will never, and is usually made in response, so you make the statement in response to a difficulty, a frustration, or a pain to protect ourselves from future hurt. Okay, so it's in response to a difficulty, frustration, or pain, and it's for self-preservation. Okay, here's the summary that you need to write down. What is it? It's a personal promise made to avoid pain. A personal promise made to avoid pain. Now, listen, not all personal promises or inner promises are bad, okay? This is just what we do as human beings. We learn from our mistakes and we make inner promises. You maybe never said it this way, but this is what we do, right? You maybe left a 3-year-old, a pair of scissors, and your new leather jacket in the same room or within the same proximity, and you learned from that, and you made yourself a vow, I am never leaving scissors next to my 3-year-old again. You can't leave the leather jacket with them because it's done now, right? It's ruined. Right? Others of you, you've had moments where you had a car accident and now you made yourself an inner promise. You're like, I'm never driving with my cell phone in my hand again. Some of you play hockey. You're the only one that ever goes on the ice with a cage hanging off your helmet, but you don't care. You made yourself a promise. You're never going on the ice without a cage because you can't afford the dental bills again, right? Like, that's just wisdom. Some of you, it's like, I'm never gonna have a political conversation in the comment section of Facebook. That's just wisdom. It's an inner promise. It's like, you get tempted, but you're like, no, I promised myself I would never. That's wisdom. Some of you are like, I'm never gonna work on the electrical panel without the power off. That's wisdom. Some of you, you shouldn't even don't even open the panel. Don't even look at it, just call the electrician, right? That should be your inner promise. That is just wisdom. And you're like, yeah, I guess I make these promises all the time. That's just wisdom, that's just maturity. But today what we're gonna realize is this fact of human nature that we're constantly making agreements with ourselves of things we will and won't do has the ability and has the potential to negatively impact your ability to follow Jesus and to have real and authentic community. This thing that is just human nature to do, to learn and grow from mistakes and make promises to never go down that road or that road, actually has the potential to impact our ability to follow Jesus and our ability to experience real and authentic community. And so today we're gonna unpack some of those things. And some of you are like, what do you mean? And here's what I'm talking about. There are inner promises that we make that are not based on wisdom, but they're based on fear. There are promises that you and I make to ourselves on a regular basis when we experience something, but they're not based on wisdom, they're based on fear. And I think about John, one of Jesus' friends, who wrote this. He says this so simply in 1 John 4:18, there's no fear in love. There's no fear in love. As Jesus people who are called to love God and love people, fear cannot be part of our equation. And that's scary even just to say. But the reality is, and you know this, it is impossible to have a relationship based in fear. It is impossible to have a relationship based in fear. You just can't do it. Why? Because if you're in a relationship and you're scared to speak up and to be honest because you're scared they're gonna leave you, it's hard to have that kind of relationship. If you're scared to actually end a relationship because there's fear, that's not gonna be a healthy relationship. Relationships don't grow in fear. Let me give you some examples of how inner promises can affect our ability to relate to people in all different realms of relationship. Let's say you were dating someone and they broke your trust. And maybe just in the moment, you were just angry, you were in bed, you were just crying into your pillow, so angry, and you just said the words, you just thought it in your head, you didn't even say it out loud, you just said, I'm never gonna trust a woman again, or I'm never gonna trust a man again. It happens all the time. Many of us have said things like that. And then we look back on our lives years later and we see all the different relationships and we realize we kept that promise. And we realize that we've had an inability to have deep, strong relationships with the opposite gender because we made a promise. And now it's impacting all of our relationships. You know, others of you, it may have been in a totally different area. It may have been you grew up poor. You know, you just never knew if there was gonna be food on the table. Your parents were constantly calling the landlord, like the rent's coming next week. And you just made a promise, you're like, I am never gonna struggle with money, or I'm never gonna be poor. And that sounds like it's based in wisdom, but it was actually based on fear of going backwards. And so now while, you know, your work ethic is amazing, it's actually gone the other way and it's now workaholism because there's fear in there. And now your kids are like, Dad, can you please come to the hockey game? Dad, can you please come to the pageant? I'm so excited. And it's just like, you just can't pull yourself away from work. Why? Because you made a promise. You were never gonna be poor. And now that fear runs your life. Fear cancels out love. It gets in the way of us being able to be our relational best. Maybe you had an experience when you were younger and you cried and an adult in your life, maybe a parent or someone else in authority, just mocked you and called you weak. And in that moment, you just vowed you were never gonna show emotion again. And now years later, people are like, why are you so emotionless? Maybe your friends joke about it. You're so cold, right? You don't celebrate, you don't grieve. I had a friend of mine who years ago had traumatic abuse in their life. And she just made a vow she was just never gonna show her emotion again. And after years of counseling and therapy and having to work through that, and trust me, like that is so mission critical. In the counseling, just realized like one of these things came up where it's like, she just realized that she had just made a promise never to feel again because she never wanted to show anyone their emotion. And she needed to, as we're gonna do, kind of break that, as we're gonna talk about at the end. And it was so fascinating to see my friend who I had known for over a decade and had known in this emotionalist state for so long, all of a sudden, after they worked through that, all of a sudden, it was like this person was like laughing and crying. I don't know why I'm so emotional. It was amazing to see the healing that came when they realized they had made an agreement in their past and it had to be broken and disagreed with to move forward. Now, some of you are like, wait, hang on, Mark. Inner promises, inner vows, agreements. Like, do you have a verse for this? Like, is there like a thou shalt not make an inner promise? Like, this sounds like pop psychology. Like, where are you getting this from? Is it Jesus when he talks about not making an oath? Like, is that it? And I actually don't think that's what Jesus was speaking about. But there's actually lots throughout scripture that would speak to this theme. And we're gonna unpack how you actually find this theme all throughout. But let me turn you to the book of Proverbs chapter 20, verse 25. And the author just says something so brilliant. He says this, he says, don't trap yourself by making a rash promise to God and only later counting the cost. He's like, don't trap yourself by making some promise, like I will, or I will never, or I will always, and never realizing the implications of that promise years later down the road. He's like, it's just wisdom that you should never do that. And as Jesus followers, that should be double important, right? Because when we make a promise, think about this, okay? The promise becomes the Lord of our life in that area, not Jesus. Once you make a promise, I will always, I will never. It doesn't matter what else is spoken to you. You're not getting off that train. You've already predetermined the outcome. And that's a scary place for Jesus followers to be. Let me just give you an example of how that could mess things up, okay? Imagine you're a parent. And imagine looking back on your childhood, you realize my parents never apologized to me. But I guess that just made me tougher. And so I'm never gonna apologize to my kids. And and things happen and you just kind of think like, well, they're gonna have to figure it out because I'm not apologizing. Then your spouse comes to you one day and they're like, hey, you were really rough with our little man the other night. Like, I think you should apologize to him. And it's like, no. My parents didn't apologize to me. I don't need to apologize to them. They'll be fine. I grew up fine. It's like, really? Then you're, next time you're like at Bible study and you're reading the book of James, Jesus' brother, and Jesus' brother says, confess your sins one to another. And you're like thinking to yourself like, yeah, but that doesn't apply to this. Then your pastor gets up and starts teaching about confessing your sins. And you're like, yeah, but you don't understand the story. You don't understand. Or, submitting ourselves to one another. It's like, yeah, but not to our kids. Kids is different. We need to show them the way, right? Then you're reading the words of Jesus and he's talking about, repentance and apologizing and humbling ourselves. And you're like, yeah, Jesus, but, and all of a sudden it's like you're discounting your pastor, you're discounting your spouse, you're discounting Jesus' brother, and now you're discounting Jesus. Why? Because you made a promise years ago, decades ago, and now that is the Lord of your life, not Jesus. This is so incredibly important for us Jesus followers because we don't want to be led by our past. We want to be led by Jesus. So this is the question Jesus followers need to ask themselves when we understand the reality that human nature is just to make promises and to figure out which way we're gonna go and which way we're not gonna go. This is the question you need to ask. Do I wanna live in response to my past or in response to where Jesus is leading? Do I wanna live in response to my past or in response to where Jesus is leading? That's the question that we're asking today because as Jesus people, we always want to be open to where Jesus is leading. But many of us, unrealizing it, are bringing in inner promises that we made years ago, and they're actually the ones that are impacting everything that we're doing and not Jesus. Now this sounds kind of extreme, but isn't it true? Isn't it true that every single one of us know people in our lives who love God, who love the scriptures, who love prayer, who love being challenged? In fact, they've been really challenging to you. They've called you out on some stuff and you're like, wow, like I love them. Like I just love watching their relationship with Jesus. And yet there seems to be an area of their life where they're just deaf to the voice of God. It's like, I don't understand why, like whenever this topic comes up, it's like they just have a predetermined outcome and they won't listen. And doesn't matter how many verses, it doesn't matter how many messages, doesn't matter how many small group conversations we have, they will not change in this area. It's like they're deaf to the voice of God. In fact, they're even combative when you talk about it. Why? Because let's go back to that slide before. They've predetermined already the direction they will go. Our promises predetermine our ability to listen to Jesus. Our promises predetermine our ability to listen to Jesus. And so in those moments when I bump up against someone who's just like, it's just clearly an area where they will not listen to Jesus or they don't want to talk about it, I just remind myself every reaction, when they kind of push back and fight back or argue, I just say every reaction is grounds for healing. Clearly there's something in the past, there's something I don't know about that has caused them to be closed off in this area, and I just want to care for them. I just want to love them. And that's what we do as Jesus followers. So then, here's the question. Let's go back to the question. I want to ask it a second time. Do I want to live in response to my past or in response to where Jesus is leading? I remember years ago, I've shared this story before in our mental health series, but I had a mental breakdown. I was pastoring a church, solo pastor, preaching almost every week, and I just crashed, full meltdown, breakdown, mental breakdown, and just curled up in a fetal position, shaking and crying uncontrollably. And I remember in that season, I just said, I don't ever want to preach again in my life. I was done. And you know the story, months went by and healing came, and eventually I had to start thinking about work again. I was off again for a long time and intense therapy and counseling, just trying to get healthy again, just to be able to live my daily life. And I remember the months as I was getting healthier and kind of looking back to, having to go back to work and figure out what I was going to do. And I was dreaming about contracting. I was dreaming about working with tools again. No joke, ask my wife, every night, my hobby was organizing my tools and organizing my tool belt. And she'd just come home and I'd just be wearing a tool belt. It's just my future was ahead of me and I was so excited about what I was gonna be doing. And I was finally gonna get my black pickup truck, which by the way, I still don't have. And if you're doing some early Christmas shopping, just remember that, okay? But as I reached this point, I remember this September, I went to McDonald's and I was sitting there with my coffee and I pulled out my journal and I was like, okay, I want to hear from God though. And I remember just saying, God, I'm open to anything. What's next in my life? And immediately, I just got the sense and I wrote it down. It was like, Mark, you know what you're supposed to do. And you know that you're called back to preach full time. And I remember writing that, it being so clear, but it wasn't until I finally sat down with God and I was willing to say, okay, anything. Forget about the rules I had. I remember there was this young adults pastor job that came along and it was you only have to preach 2 or 3 times a year. And I was like, yes, that's perfect. I won't have to preach and I can still do ministry. Which, isn't it interesting how Satan will lie to you and tell you that you've made an inner promise if it's always or never? But for me, it was just, as long as I can get away from the weekly grind of preaching, I will be free. So 2 to 3 times a week, not quite always, that wasn't an inner promise or a vow. And God was like, no, it totally was. Because I have a calling on your life. And if you continue to live in response to this fear because of the hurt that you had, you were trusting in a promise to protect you. And I wasn't trusting in Jesus to protect me. If I hadn't taken the time to say, God, I'm open to anything, please speak into my life, get rid of any of these lies that I've spoken, I would never have discovered what God was calling to me. I would never have come here with my family to Guelph. I would never met my Lakeside family. Why? Because the inner promise would have been guiding my life instead of Jesus. Today, I so want you to be free of any inner promises that you've made. I want you and I want me to continue to live our lives daily in response to the voice of Jesus through the Holy Spirit. I so want that for our community. I don't want our past dictating how we will live in the future. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to get your pen out and I want to read to you a long list. And this is by no means exhaustive, but I just want to get your mind kind of understanding the different types of promises that we make ourselves in the midst of really hard times and the way they can impact us. So I'm going to read you this list. They don't just cover the ones that impact our ability to be in community. They cover all of life, but you're going to see some of them in the way that they would impact community. And then later on, we'll go to the Q&R, and then we'll actually have a time of walking through maybe some inner promises that the Holy Spirit wants to reveal to you today. So here's some examples of some inner promises that maybe you've made along the way. I will never trust men again. I will never trust women again. I will never trust anyone again. I will never trust white people. I will never trust black people. I will never hire an immigrant. I will never let anyone love me. I will never show weakness. I will never be a dad. I will never be a mom. I will never allow anyone to touch me. I will never trust a pastor again. I will never share what is mine. I will never allow anyone to help me or to give me money. I will never go out at night. I will never share openly. I will never speak in public. I will never trust the church again. I will never serve on a team again. I will never join a small group. I will never marry a pastor. True story, that was one of Trefina's that she had to turn her back on. I will never ask God for anything. I will never let anyone know the deep thoughts in my heart. I will never let anyone get that close again. I will never cry in public again. I will never let anyone see that side of me. I will never be like my parents. There's one we've all said. I will never go to church. I will never become a Christian. Some of you, you're watching today, you're like, I'm not a Jesus follower. I swear I'd never be a religious person. Maybe that's the promise you made that is getting in the way of you hearing the voice of God in your life and having a relationship with him. And maybe you made it for good and valid reasons. You had a bad church experience. You had a bad Christian experience with other Jesus people. And that was the vow you made. And ever since then, you're like, hey, but I'm curious about God, but you never realized there was a promise that you made yourself. And so you refused. There's like a wall that you put up. Now, let me just say this really clearly. As I read those, maybe some of you were like, wow, so many of these apply to me. I'm overwhelmed. Some of you are like, you're looking at one of them and you're saying, oh my gosh, I made that 20 years ago. And that has been directing my life ever since. You're feeling guilt. You're feeling shame. Can we just pause for a second? Because that is not at all what I'm hoping to do with this message. But many of those inner promises that you made actually protected you in a season. They got you out of a hard situation. They were survival. So there's no shame and there's no judgment on you. Today is a day where we're just going to invite the Holy Spirit to reveal those to us. And then we're going to remember that our God, as Robin said earlier, is a God of redemption. There is nothing our God cannot redeem, even an inner promise that maybe has been directing your life for the last decade or more. Our God will always and can always redeem. So today, the decision I'm gonna invite you to make is whether you're gonna rely on a promise to continue to keep you safe, a promise you made in reaction to a bad experience out of fear, or if you're gonna trust Jesus with the role of keeping you safe. And what's on the line? If we don't deal with these vows, not only are we gonna miss out on the life God is calling us to because we've already predetermined our decision in certain areas, we're gonna miss out on real authentic community. Because think about this. We and everybody we're around bring our inner promises into every environment that we go into. When you go to have a coffee with a friend or multiple friends, or you sit down in a small group, or you chat out in the atrium when we're able to do that, if you still have your inner promises, that will continually impact the depth at which your community can go. Someone will suggest, hey guys, wouldn't it be cool? I was just reading all the times that Jesus calls us to live charitable lives, to live generous lives. And that other person in your circle who's made that vow to never be generous, nobody shared with me, I'm not sharing with anyone, will always shoot it down. You know, someone else is like, hey guys, I was just really thinking it'd be really neat if we called each other out on things and shared openly and iron sharpened iron. And the other person's like, I don't trust anyone. I don't share openly. I don't speak in public. We'll shut it down every single time. We bring our vows, we bring our promises with us in every single environment, including our relationships. And if we will not deal with them, they will continually get in the way of us opening ourselves to community. We can't control the ones that other people have made, but we absolutely can invite the Spirit to speak into the ones that we have in our lives. So here's what I'm gonna walk you through in a moment after the Q&R. 3 things. Identify the inner promise that you made. Reject, turn your back on, renounce the inner promise, and welcome Jesus in. Identify, reject, welcome Jesus in. And some of you, once you identify it, you're gonna have to add a step before reject, which is you may have to work through forgiveness. So you may realize, listen, I said I was never gonna join a small group because of someone who lied to me in a small group. And then you realize I've never forgiven them. And so you actually probably need to pause there. You need to go back to the messages we did on forgiveness and debt collecting and how to relieve debt the proper way. That was in our vaccine series. And as you walk through forgiveness, then you identify, forgive, reject, and welcome Jesus in. So that's the format we're gonna go through in a moment. I'll lead you through that prayer time, but let's just pause, because this may be new for some of you, and let's go to our Q&A or Q&R, and let's see if there's any questions that have come in.
Well, here's one, Mark. But Mark, it's going to be good. But Mark, I was so hurt and betrayed by a small group I was in. There was someone there so toxic, I just had to check out. And I swore I wouldn't put myself in that position again. So I guess you could say I swore is the same as, inner promise.
Yeah.
How do you, I feel for this person.
Yeah, totally. And we've all been there.
Yeah,
we've all,
I think so.
I should say all, but yeah, no, totally. And I actually think you made the right decision. When you find someone that's so toxic, I mean, we've talked about this numerous occasions, count the number of times that Jesus walks away from toxic people. So the walking away was wise. The promise or the vow or what was the word they used? They like, I vowed never to do that again.
I swore never to,
That's the danger though.
Yeah.
Because that is, again, it's based on fear. And so then now every relationship you go in, you're suspicious of it. So the wisdom part says, I'm cautious. Trust is something that needs to be built, so you don't just jump back into it. But I would say there's actually the element of that vow will stop you from trusting anyone and ever being able to have a relationship again. And there is, let's just call this out and say it for what it is, there's always risk in relationship. What's the theologian says, to love is to risk hurt. Or I don't know, someone says it much more profoundly than that. But I don't know if you have another thought on that, but that would be my first reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, along those lines, I just think when I think of the richness and the potentiality for depth of community, to shut yourself off of that forever because of an incident like this, not to minimize the incident. And it may be an incident in which you might need actually some counseling because some people are just that toxic and the hurt could just be that deep. But it would be, it's like saying, it's better never to have loved than to have, what's that saying?
Oh, loved and lost. Gosh, we're terrible at quoting.
Terrible. Someone can type that in if you want to help me out.
Clearly,
here.
if we don't have the quote in our sermon notes, we're useless.
But it's that idea that, risk, you can risk not being hurt again, but when you build up those prison walls to keep yourself safe, you're actually keeping yourself imprisoned from the joy and beauty and depth and love of relationship. So I guess it's the same as in any relationship, right? Marriage, parent-child, friends. It's the forgiveness and grace piece. Even if you have to keep up a boundary from that particular toxic person, to shut yourself off from all future experiences of intimacy and authentic relationship in a circle of friends would be tragic. Yeah,
and just to remind you, we spoke about this a couple months ago, but so then, you forgive, you learn, but to forgive someone is not to trust them again. So it doesn't mean you just then go right back into that small group, be like, I'm gonna trust openly again and share, knowing that you're gonna be sharing this online or with other people. No, trust is different than forgiveness. Trust is rebuilt. Forgiveness is given because Christ gives it to us. Trust is rebuilt. Or it's not. Yeah. Do you have another one?
A couple more. Mark, you chatted about the difference between wisdom and inner promises. How do we know the difference between a decision that is helping us or harming us?
Yeah. That's a great question. And that's where I lean into community. And it's hard when maybe these things are keeping you out of community. But when you talk with your friend, maybe you have a different thought on this, but in a sense, they're all inner promises. Some of them are just that's just a wise life decision. I will never, play with electrical panels, versus something that just blocks you off from community and relationship. But I just talk to your friends, say, guys, this is something I've been doing for the last 10 years. Does this seem like it's helping or hurting relationships? I think that's a good place to start. I don't know if you have another thought on that.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And a great shout out to Dave and Sherry. Saved our bacon here. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. That's what I was trying to get at. Thanks, Dave and Sherry. Another question here. I've been rejected a lot in my life. I think I've unconsciously made a promise not to open up to people. Where do I start to let go of that promise?
We're going to do that in a few minutes. We actually just need to bring it to Jesus. And this is the wild part that I don't have a theological dissertation to explain, but Jesus heals. And there is something powerful about revealing it to him, trusting him with it, turning our back on it, and then watching that process of healing begin. But that's, I'd say, where you start it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to bring it out in the open.
You had mentioned before, briefly in your sermon, but then didn't answer the question, about the difference when Jesus said about making a vow.
Yes.
Are you able to clarify that today?
Yeah. So from my understanding, because I looked at that, because a lot of people speak about inner vows and they quote that verse. So I was like, So I did a lot of research on it, and what it really seemed to be was that in that world, when people wanted their words to have weight, it was like, I swear on heaven and earth and all this stuff. And Jesus was like, you don't need to call all that in. Just be someone who's known as your yes is a yes and your no is a no. You're a person of integrity. You don't have to be like, and I swear on my mother's grave, I will. So it just isn't at all what we're talking about today. But it sounds good. Jesus said we shouldn't have oaths, so don't make any inner oaths or vows, but it's just not accurate.
Here's another one, and just maybe a disclaimer. We are not psychologists, right? Let's just...
Yes, thank you.
That's not us.
No.
We're just trying to give
We see psychologists.
We do. We do. Yeah. Speed dial. But yeah, no, we're just trying to give some wise advice from the Jesus way, really.
Yeah.
But that's not to discount further work. But this question says, when you've held so much stuff in for so long, and you're not really sure of what's closed you off, or you've been through so many hurts in your life, how do you identify what's controlling you? Hence the disclaimer.
Yeah. I think your caveat was good about therapy and counseling. They're professionals to work you through this stuff. But this is why at Lakeside we always say, like, we're not trying to cover it all, but invite the Spirit of God to bring the one to mind he wants to deal with today. You will see Jesus constantly dealing with people, and he doesn't go after everything. It's like, but today I'm calling this out. And so that's why, and maybe that's a good transition, as we pray, we're not saying, like, God, I got 27 vows, I'm sure I'm hiding below the surface. It's like, Jesus is gentle and patient, and we just trust him with, let's just do it one at a time. And so maybe let's just actually do that now. Let's just trust that God is good. He's a good parent, and he knows the first thing that we can handle, first thing that we can tackle. And so let's just invite the Spirit of God, grab a pen and paper in case he reveals something to you. That way you have it written down and can test it later. But Holy Spirit, would you bring to mind one thing, one promise, one vow, one I will always or I will never statement, a memory of something that happened and maybe something internal, of a visceral reaction, maybe we had to it that we don't even compartmentalize as a vow, but we realize it's been dictating our life ever since. We're just gonna be still, and we just want you to bring that to mind, Holy Spirit. One thing, please. Question. As you look at that vow or that promise that I will always, I will never, just realize that has probably, as we talked about, protected you from certain things, kept you away from certain things. But today, do you want to decide that Jesus is your protector and not that vow, that Jesus is the one with you in relationship, not that vow as some barrier to keep us safe, but as Robin said, will also keep us isolated. And now let's reject it. You can simply just write it out or say it out loud or in your mind, Lord, I reject that promise. I renounce that. I turn my back on it. I repent from it. That just means it's a fancy way of saying I do a 180. That's what was leading my life. Now I'd like you to lead my life. In your own words, tell God and declare it. And now, thirdly, welcome Jesus in. And that's scary. But welcome him in. Again, in your own words, say, Jesus, I feel naked without that. I feel naked without that guard, without that rule. without that line of defense, that I'm stepping back into community. I might pick up the phone and call someone again. I may actually make the first move. And maybe you made a vow never to make the first move, never to call unless they call first. Whatever it is, you say, Jesus, I'm stepping out and I want to live in response to you. Just tell them that in your own words. Well, friends, like we said, that is something you can continue to do. It's a discussion you can have with friends or family or just alone in your quiet time. You can just daily be asking God, are there things in my past that I've agreed to that you want me to break agreement with? And as you go, I want to just give you two things. One is just a piece of advice that's given to me and I want to share with you. Maybe it should have been in the message, but I'll put it here is the best way to deal with inner promises is not to make them in the first place. And often we make inner promises in really hard seasons. Some of you are in a very hard season right now. Don't make any inner promises. Don't make any inner vows. Don't make the statements, I will always, from this day forward, I will never, based on fear. But instead, and I want to just bless you with these words, the words from the book of James, speaking to businessmen who are planning all of their business endeavors for the next year. And he's like, why are you making all these plans? And I promise I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And he's like, just say this. If it is the Lord's will, we will do this or that. The scriptures are full of people who had no idea what God was gonna do in their life. There's Moses, who's a stutterer. He's like, I don't speak. And God just breaks that. He's like, you're going to speak to Pharaoh. And so Lakeside, my blessing for you today is you will be people who do not live in response to your past hurts, your past pain, past trauma. You live in response to the voice of Jesus, and you just say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. Love you, Lakeside. Have a fantastic week.
Mark, can I just add, this is not easy stuff. And if you would like someone to pray with you for this, we have prayer ministers, and they would love to pray with you through this. So by all means, reach out. You can text the number that was on the screen and in the chat column, and someone would be happy to call you this week or reach out by email and pray with you through this.